Alright, testing, testing. Okay, we're recording. Alright, Surface Transportation Board, Chapter 10, Part 1, 1245, Title 49, Subchapter 10, Part 1245, Classification Railroad Employees Report Service Compensations. 1245.1 Rules governing classification employees service compensation. 1245.2 Reports of railroad and services and compensation. 1245.3 Employees definition of service job with compensation. 1245.4 Forms required to be used. 1245.5 Classification of job titles. 1245.6 Cross-reference standard occupation classifications classification manual. Alright, 1245.1 Rules governing classification employees serve with the compensation. Rules governing the classification railroad employee with the report serve with the compensation outlined with the 1245.3, 1245.4 required with all Class 1 railroads within the scope of the 11.145. The interstate commerce governed with such rules, preparation, submission for the annual other periodic reports served with the Transportation Board in accordance with the forms adopted. Such returns 1245.2. Also, respect with any of the other materials covered these rules. 1245.2 Reports of the railroad employees serve with the compensation. Each Class 1 railroad required with the file with the quality report. Railroad employees serve with the compensation quarterly wage forms A and B with addition. Such carrier shall also file annual report Annual report of railroad employees for the compensation. Annual wage forms A and B with each of the calendar report. Both reports submitted with the paper electronically off of the Economics Surface Transportation Board, Washington, D.C. Quarterly reports submitted within 30 days after the end of each of the calendar quarter. The annual report shall be submitted within 45 days after the end of the year reporting year. 1245.3 Employees definitions of the hours and compensation definitions. Employees word employees used in this part intended to include every person in the service reporting carrier subject and continuing authority of the supervisor direct manner of the written edition of his service person engaged with the render only specifically defines for the time subject with the continuing authority carrier to supervise the control their acts such as the custom house brokers lawyers retained only with specific caveats under general container retainer or not. Employees use the meaning of the term used in this part of the counting. Employees, since the number of the employees fluctuates for the carriers, require to classify the count all their employees 12 different times each year. Joint employee with each of the joint employees shall be carried with the payroll. Several joint employers account with each of the employee represented with the return the number of the employees fraction based on the number of the employees reporting him. If a person, for example, the reportable 3 employees, he should include him in the number of the employees as one with the third employee. The entire of the compensation joint employee with each other. They have the payroll. Single joint with the employers pay for the employee with the lawyer. Such of the employee should pay for the purpose of the return treat employee solely by the employer service hour, the number of the hours duly held with the duty, number of the hours paid, area to be certain of the record for every of the class of employee, engine man of the trainman, actual number of the mile of the run, mile paid for not running after the record, as well as the number of the hours on duty, the number of hours per paid for hour, paid for served the times of the classes of the employees shall be recorded in hours instead of the days of the thereof. Therefore, whenever the employee works more than one occupation and more than one class of service, both the number of hours worked in the compensation paid shall be separated. Properly reporting divisions. If the employee is paid with the wage of the smaller number of the hours constitute the day of the work, the number of hours paid with as well as the actual number of the hours of the duly should be a certain with the recorder that allow the meal of the part of the holidays, the absence of the leave, the vacations, the leisure should be excluded from the time actually worked. If such for the paid it should be appropriately reported for the time paid but not worked for Form A and or consent constructive allowance on Form B. The requirements apply with the engine man with the train man being based on the trips of the miles run. The employees paid at the place of the of the rate as well as the employee with the paid hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and on other time basis. Service hours for the officers and employees do not receive the payment. Overtime should be reported with the number of hours each month of the 8 hours per contemplated with the position. Compensation. The compensation employees defined in the rules of the parties are stated in such a manner that the detailed forms of the periodically return require. 1245.4 Forms required to be illustrated. The report information serve with the transportation railroad employee serve with the compensation include with the two forms. Form A relate with the employee with the train with the engine serve with the employee with the Form B relate with the train engine serve with the employees. B with the general reference of the statement of the compensation of the employees. The Form A and B should be understood with the total compensation received with the employee with the reporting division as well as the amount of the work they perform should be there shown properly with the distributed the unprescribed the column heads if it is indicated by the forms. It should be noted that the work of the employee varies during the reported period. His time of the compensation should be apportioned accordingly. The amounts reported should be gross compensated pay. And then it goes over an illustration as whereas indicated the shape that the number of the employees are served with the company with the respective report divisions depend on the allocation of individual employees as day of the count. Reporting division should be formed A and B with the following with all of the connection for the employer schedule. The annual reports for Class 1 and Class 2 to the board. Railroads of Class 3 and leaser companies companies shall report only information required for the annual report forms described in such companies. And then it goes over some pictures, some charts, and then a list. Let's see what else they got. And that was chapter 1245. I think we did 1246, number of the railroads, if we didn't cover this already. Each Class 1 railroad shall file the monthly report of the number of the railroad employees formed each of the months, where it shall be submitted to the paper electronic official economic surface transportation board, Washington, at the end of the month for which it applies. Alright, and I'm sorry we don't do charts or appendixes or some of the notations, but we do cover the laws. This is 1245 classification railroad employees report of the compensation.